when the biographies of the Chazon Ish started being published, so it was they always had this anecdote. When the HaRav was told that the Chazon Ish was nifter, so he responded by saying that yesterday there was a world with Chazon Ish, and today we're living in a world without Chazon Ish. He might have said it in an emotional voice, but that's what he said. I must have heard this 55 years ago. And truthfully, what exactly transpired in that moment when the Chazon Ish, when the HaRav was saying that? Yesterday there was a world with Chazon Ish, and today is a world without Chazon Ish. What's so profound in this world, in these words? And somehow these words had significance to the writer that wrote them. And the truth is, the Gemara teaches us that Eliezer, Eved Avram's long monologue and dive back and forth with Besuel and Lavan is recorded in such great length in the Torah, and twice, as it's happening and as he's repeating it. And Harbe Gufei Torah are only mentioned in short few words, big parshas in the Torah. Teretz is because Sichasam of Avdei Avos, every nuance is so important. Sichas and Shalavas, Alachas Kama B'Kama. So when a gadol of the magnitude of the HaRav makes a statement like that, it warrants Eon and it warrants Yigia to try to understand what was just said and what's so profound about it. Chazal say, Eino the Moimet, there's such a thing as Arbayim Shnin. I really never grasped it. What exactly was the significance of those words? B'shuschem, I think yesterday, I grasped it. Yesterday was the day that the first time in the history of the Yishuv HaChadosh in Bnei Brak, 70 years or more, that an enemy attack killed people in the city. At least it didn't happen in the last 70 years. It's obvious that when Chaim was alive, his Koyach HaTorah protected. Most of us are old enough to remember vividly 30 years ago when the Scuds were flying from Iraq at Eretz Yisrael, and none of them impacted on the city of Bnei Brak. Rav Chaim felt that you don't even have to, in Bnei Brak, and he called it the Chazon Ish city, the Koyach HaTorah. You don't need even those shelters that they were using at that time to protect. And Kachav, there was no hit in Bnei Brak. And it's been quiet in Bnei Brak all the years. There's been a lot of terrorism in Eretz Yisrael. And in Bnei Brak was spared. And a few days after the Shiva of Chaim, Neibrak wasn't spared. And there were 2 Torah Jews that were killed yesterday. 3 Goyim and 2 Elya. Rabbi, they call him HaRav. If some chazisel from Kelm, in one of his Maimorim, is a Hesped that he gave on his father. And the Hesped goes on the famous pasuk in Yeshaya, At Tzadik Ovad, the Ein Ish Thom Alev, the Anshe Chesed, Nesofim, Mibli Mavin, Ein Mavin, Kimipnei Oro Nesaf Atzad. Famous Kimipnei Oro Nesaf Atzadik, which Rashi brings, the Seva Toiva of Avram Avinu, that he didn't see Esav Yoitzel Tarbus Ra. So he was Mipnei Oro Nesaf Atzad. If some Chazisel points out that in this concept of Mipnei Oro Nesaf Atzadik, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes away a tzaddik in anticipation of a ra, could have 2 interpretations. And in history we find both. It could be to prevent the ra, that the tzaddik is removed to be megan and to be mechaper on the door, Misa Tzadikim mechaperes. But on the other hand, sometimes it's the opposite. HaKadosh Baruch Hu removes the tzaddik to spare him the anguish of witnessing the ra, Mipnei Arosh Nesaf Tzaddik, like by Avram Avinu, by the Shoah, by the Holocaust. We know that right in the beginning of the Holocaust, the Gedolei Olam, the Bikashmul, the Baruch Ber, Reb Shimon, other Gedolei Olam were plucked out right in the first months of the war. And the Chazon Ish said that if they would have been alive, their Yegiyas HaTorah would have prevented. The Gzeira of Hitler couldn't have taken effect. Kozman, their Yegiyas HaTorah was, and the Eibishter had to remove them to allow this to take place. On the other hand, we do find Misa Tzadikim Mechaperes, and that takes off Charoy Naf. He says, what does it depend on? He says, it depends on Somalei. If we internalize, Klal Yisrael internalizes the Misas HaTzadik and understands what Tzadik Ovad L'Doira Yovad, understands the void that the Tzadik's Ptira leaves behind, and does the proper tikkunim to try to collectively fill the void, then Mipnei Ra Nesaf HaTzadik is to avoid Ra. And Misa Tzadikim Mechaperes. If Chas v'Sholom, it's Einish Somalei. Talk about the Tzadik, we chapes pilas from the Tzadik. We wow on every nuance, and every new nuance that we hear about the tzaddik. I'm going to get weiter. And it's not a life-altering happening in the lives of the Yachid or in the Tzibur, then that's Misa Tzadikim is squandered. And it's not Megan on the door, Chas v'Sholom. And then it comes out that the tzaddik was taken away as not to see the Puranius, which was not prevented by the proper response to his, as Reb Simcha Zissel says in that Hesped. Forgive me, but I believe the Miroiv Kedushasai of the Brisker Rav, he felt that someone in the door has to utter those words that we, the Klal Yisrael, internalizes what just happened. There was a world where the Chazon Ish was being magen on the world, with carrying Klal Yisrael, all that the Chazon Ish encompassed. And the minute he's taken from us, the world is a different world. There is no Chazon Ish to magen on the door. It says in Mishlach that the Meraglim were told to check out if there's a tzaddikim beineim of the goyim, of the Knaanim, to be magen on them. It's a state. So he said, "Se gewena ador mit Chazon Ish, wenn a Welt mit Chazon Ish." It's on the Welt, a protective cover, someone that's magen. In Heint is a Welt on Chazon Ish. And just by the Brisker Rav saying it, those powerful words said by a Gadol Ador, by someone of the magnitude of the Brisker Rav, had in them the value that Klal Yisrael was Som Alev. The Brisker Rav, by just saying that one sentence, was Moitzi Klal Yisrael with Som Alev. And that protected. The fact that Klal Yisrael understands that there was a world with Chazon Ish and there's a world now without Chazon Ish, and oy vey, what's going to be, is Som Alev. So Al Kaponim, on his own level, he contributed his Som Alev. And that Som Alev, who knows how much Puranios it prevents. We lay in Parshas Parah on Shabbos, on the last day of the Shiva of Reb Chaim. We all know that the next pasuk after Parshas Parah is Misas Miriam. And Rashi says, in the name of the Gemara, Mayat Cotton, that Loma Nisbecha Parshas Parah of Misas Miriam. It's a little bit tricky. Rashi says that just like Kabbanos are mechaper, Misas Tzadikim is mechaper. In the Gemara state, like Parah is mechaper, Misas Tzadikim is mechaper. But Rashi somehow calls it Karbanos. But the place where the Torah chose to teach that to us is Parah Aduma. There's other Karbanos that are mechaper. Paralim Davar Shol Tzibur is mechaper. Parkoyim Mashiach is mechaper. Syria of the Kachavim is mechaper. There are many Karbanos that are mechaper. Parim and Israfim, Sirim and Israfim. It could have been in Shlach, it could have been in Vayikra, it could have been in many different places. No, Paradum. Paraduma on the totem pole of Kedushas HaKarbanos is pretty low. Paraduma is the Etzem Kocher Bedek Abayis. The Gemara says it's Chatos Karye Rachmana. It's called a Chatos. Efer HaChatos. It's not done in Avoid is not done in Beis Hamikdash. The Shechita, the Azaz are all done on the HaRamishcha. Noichach HaRabayis, but they're not done in the Beis Hamikdash. It's on the Sod carbon. But it has one characteristic that's set it aside from all the korbanos. It's a carbon that afterwards the whole parah, as Pirshav is burnt into Afer. And then we take mayim and we add it to the efer. Efer achatos is put with mayim chayim. And then that's used for tairas shlishi v'shvi of a tomei mace. So it's a carbon that's burnt and made into efer, and that efer chatos together with mayim chayim becomes the mazeh me'anida, and that's retire from tumas mace, which is the biggest tumah that we have. Nisa tzadikim is nimshal to that. Most kabbanis, all kabbanis, we bring a carbon. Either the tzibur or the yachid brings a carbon to the Eibishter. And that's mechaper. And that's nechoyach. And that's meyin. And that's meyin min ha-paraniyos. Paradum is a different kind of carbon. You don't bring a carbon only. The carbon is to get the hechsher of the mechatos. The analogy to Misa Tzadikim is the sreif that we also lay in this Shabbos. The sreifa shesoraf Hashem ba'alcheichem kol beis Yisrael yifku es ha-sreifa shesoraf Hashem. Like there's a sreifa of the Torah, there's a sreifa shesoraf Hashem. And now what happens after the sreifa shesoraf Hashem? Yifku. What is that yifku? Magidus. Shloishalum lechi. Shivalu Hesped. Lemisped. Shlishi Shvi. But there's a cleansing process. The Misa Tzadikim is a sreifa shesarf Hashem. And we take the efer of that sreifa. And we retire ourselves with the efer of that sreifa. Zorakti aleichem. By internalizing, by understanding what was and what isn't, what a world with Reb Chaim Kanievsky represents, what a world without Reb Chaim Kanievsky is. And Chazal say, Kala oilam kulay nizan b'shvil, by Reb Chanina ben Doisa, Kala oilam kulay b'shvil, nizan b'shvil Chanina b'ni. The Chanina b'ni dailoi mekaf charuvim. We all lived because of this B'toish Hashem, this Adam HaGadol V'Anokim. B'tziloi nichya b'goyim. Asher amarnu b'tziloi nichya b'goyim. And give a look. What kind of week this was in Eretz Yisrael. And in Bnei Brak. It's a message. The limud zchus, a gadol of this kind of magnitude, with the difference between us and the gadol are galaxies apart. And you start saying, so what? The Yam HaGadol dried up, so what am I going to pour? I'm going to pour water bottles in to fill the hole of the Yam HaGadol, this huge crevice that was left over, an empty Yam HaGadol, so we're going to fill it up. That's how we think. And there's validity to the thought. But the Rebbeinu Shalom did not create a world for Churban. He created the world to exist on the day after. And if it's true, and we're maminim b'nei maminim, that we existed in everything that was going on in the world, and the olam k'minogay noyig of the last decades is with Chaim Kanievsky's credit. then obviously on the day after, the Rebbeinu Shalom is teaching us that there's a way to continue. There's a path forward. And although it sounds so far from our understanding, we'll take all the madregas in the world and bring them together. How are we going to be Rav Chaim Kanievsky? How are we going to be Mamalei of the Cholol of Rav Chaim Kanievsky? Of a Sizazeh. But we have to begin somewhere. The Gedolei Olam that are Mevinim on what this is and what this was. I heard, I saw the Hesped of David Landau Shlita in Kollel Chazanish Monday night. It was all of 8.5 minutes, but I listened to it 3 times. He said, he said, you're talking about a goyin and a tzaddik, not of our doiris, but of doiris kedoimim, from Friedik doiris. And he says, and in those doiris, in those Friedik doiris, he would have been an ateres teferes. That is the lashon that he used. And it's obvious. We start hearing about the Nehirin Loi, the clarity that Kol HaTorah Kula was munach in his, and the Yiyas HaTorah. But amazingly enough, it's all recorded. It's all on record. Probably hundreds and thousands of pictures, of moving pictures, of video and audio. La'ain shir and la'ain mispah. It's all there for the world to see. There never has been this anything resembling the level of coverage which this Sarah Torah was zeichet to, and we were zeichet to. So the Rebbeinu Shalom sent the Mus from hundreds of years ago. And it's all recorded with the most modern technology, the same modern technology that has caused so much destruction in our time and so much opposite of Gedusha and Yira and Torah. And here the Rebbeinu Shalom uses this as an instrument that, Haketza, what is this? So you stop a minute and think. The Yetzer Hara has in his employ the ability to beautify and to glorify and to make it so seductive and appealing. All the niderikkeit of Olam Hazeh, whether it's through his neon lights, through the tremendous ability of the latest innovations of Medicine Avenue, advertisements, colorful advertisements, fantasies, in a Kala Kovet, und schleppt da rein in the Toyu von Gashmias, in the Toyu von Arzias, in the Toyu of the opposite of Kirvas Elokim. And really, the Yetzer Toiv, what does he have in his employ? Just common sense. Ishmis ken b'chacham. That's what the Gemara in the Dorim calls. I'll be the pasuk in Koheles. So, Ishmis ken b'chacham. But common sense is about plukta. With Madison Avenue. Madison Avenue has a budget of hundreds of billions of dollars in its employ to take Olam Hazeh and just throw it at you relentlessly. And Yetzer Toiv answers back with common sense, please. Please, Toiv like every key soil in the world. Oilam yodam yeshamayim baseis moidala emes. The Toiva emes mulvava in the yashkin v'yoyma. That's a machloikis. Das ist aber Flukte. We're human. The Elya Lapian sagt, and that's a steer to a Gemara, this fight of the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. In Gemara that gepaskint lahalacha, that a dayan can't sit in judgment on two litigants if one of them is dressed and the other one is dressed up as hashmati. It's midvar sheketir. You're not allowed to take the case till the guy that's wearing the shmatis changes into nice clothes, or the guy that's wearing the nice clothes changes into shmatis. The dayan is not allowed to litigate the case because midvar sheketir. So how in the world is a Yalud Isha, with all the tricks that the Rebbeinu Shalom allows the Yetzer Hara to use and throw against us, how could he sit in a judgment with a Yetzer Tov whispering in his ear logic, when against that the whole Olam Hazeh, the whole Toyevos and everything of the Welt is at him? He's a human being. What does he do? So he says, "Das meint the Gemara moshcheu lebeis hamedrash." Bring him in to the beis medrash. Sit him down by a toys. Sit with him and learn of this. Steht doch. Anechmadem izov u'mipaz rav u'mesuke mitvash v'noifes tzufim. No. Finally, the Torah, the Tzara Tov, has its equal. It's a Kameshtikal Gemara, Nun Beis, so you could also spell so. And Shlomo Melech called him Soine, the Yetzer Hara, and Roav Sanacha, Achilei Lechem, Lachmo Shel Torah, and somehow even the Yetzer Hara gets sued from the Lachmo Shel Torah. Torah Tav. Takes time. Everybody that's fashiket from the advances of the Yetzer Hara is able to just go into the Besmedrash, open the Gemara, and knack away in a Sishayin Akleicha Mulcham. Harve Kategurim, Ikan Adgicha. Took the Eibishter and Wiffel footage, Seda, from the Shena hotels from Mexico at Cuba, from Venezuela bis the Riviera, Keneged Zeh, Zeva Uma Zeh, Asalikim, Lahav the $11 in a little room on Mashbam 23, sitzt da Yid in a vermachten Zimmer, and all he has is a Gemara and a Mishnayos, and gets a cook. Find me one guy down there in all these Varamalender and all these beautiful beachfronts and all these kosher hotels. Find me one guy in the whole hotel who has 1/1,000,000th of the joy of life that I don't have to yamayim in. I just look at him and see him on the video. Find me one guy in all the Yetzer Hara's hotels, in all the Yetzer Hara's places that has an enjoyment 1/1,000,000th of what exhibits in a second glimpse if you look at him. That's what I call in English the great equalizer. This is what we were zeichet. And now we don't have it. This is the Mayim Tahira. Sit and be misboine. What this Demus represented. Just imagine that what you're seeing here, that was Rebbe Kiva. That was the Ktsois. That was the Nesivis. That was Kol Gedoyle Yisrael and all the Dairis. Ashrei Ayin Ra So Eila. Aloy Mishma Oizen Do'ava Nafshein. Can you imagine if we would have a video of the Kohen Gadol doing Avodah B'Yom Kippurim? Maria Kohen. We try our best on Yom Kippur to get a glimpse of Marikoyim. Menagnim try, Chazonim try. Imagine if we would have footage of Marikoyim. Here we had footage of Godel. Yosef Koyin Godel. Yekorahim Ifnin. Yekorahim Koyin Godel Shenichtas Lefnai Ulefnim. We saw it. That's to try to use the moment, like a famous word from a baron, with the Yid that was a Weistois, a very choshev zvulun. Asked him, Rebbe, so what's the adifis of the Yisachar over the zvulun if lemaisa smach zvulun b'tzeisecha and tal oiris talecha and in Yeneveld zvulun sits and knacks in a Chaim biscuits Torah together with Yisachar? It was gerecht. But how could you compare to Yisachar's olam hazeh? Who do azal olam hazeh v'Yisachar? So it's a shayne word. Aaron gesagt. A funny thing. I wonder how easy it's to take those videos and put them on. If you have to show off somebody, you sitting with the Chaim. No, so but if it's you, give a cook a HaRav Chaim video. And not a HaRav Chaim video. HaRav Chaim in the middle of a meeting. The second the meeting is already overrun its course. Takes out that, what's it called, that index card. I saw it 3 years ago. When he takes out his index card, and he starts learning. He was learning Gemara Yerushalmi Trumas. And he starts moving the index card. You ever saw the chilik between a plane and a helicopter? A plane has to go on the runway till it goes up. A helicopter doesn't have to go up, it doesn't have to stop. It goes right down. He's taking he doesn't go from the line, he takes the whole line in. And he goes, ich kann sagen, the Aleph and Aleph in Trumas. If it took 50 seconds, is a sach. But the Machzeh, the Hoyt, the Olam Hazeh, the Torah Spichum Alpha Zov Chesed, the Mesukim Midvash V'Noifes Tzufin. That's the Torah. Avada, there's a Sreifa Sapora. There's a Sreifa Shesorah Hashem. But the avodah is to take that offer, take that Efer, put in some mayim, sprinkle it b'shlishi, sprinkle it b'shvi. Ta'ati eschem mikol tu moisechem, umikol gilulechem atayr eschem. Das hat gemeint der Brisker Rav. Oi me versteht, als Nächten ist gewähnt a Welt mit Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Nach Mann und Zlan heint ist a Welt ohne Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Jene Welt der Araber nicht gekannt reingehen in Bnei Brak. Die Welt, they got into Bnei Brak. Do we want it Rahman al-Litzlan again? Do we want to leave the world unprotected? If the Rebbeinu Shalom lets the world stand, it means we have the ability to find collectively the way to protect. Just remind myself, it's Hesped. When a baron was nifter, I was already a 14-year-old boy in Aftam Shir. Wasn't a kid, I was a 14-year-old boy. My Rebbe spoke with it. And the world was, in America for sure, I can't tell you anywhere else. But in America, we were walking around like a soimin mayinu beina. How is there going to be in America without the baron? It's hard to believe, but that's the way it was. And Rav Hutner didn't give a Hesped right away. He gave a mimer in yeshiva, a long one, must have been 2 or 3 hours. But he began with the Gemara of Shavik Chaim L'chol Chaim. He says, when these Gedolim go away, they leave a void. But that's not a void. It's a void to be filled. Shavik Chaim L'chol Chaim. And it's the collective avodah of the Anishorim to somehow do something to cover the void. He said it on Avaran, and I'm sure it's true on all the Gedolim, the Chol Dar V'Dar. And that's what the Chazon Ish was, the Brisker Rav was telling himself. there was a world without Chazon Ish. But that world was protected. What's going to be with the new world? So we have to take the new world and somehow give it its protection. Oilonu that we saw yesterday, the chush, what this world looks like when it loses its protection. Eibusher should be going to Pitzaseinu. Benissen nigalu, benissen asidim li goyel. And we should be able to be zeicher to the neidel chashir chadash. Al gulaseinu al kedus nafshein.